In this video, we're going to introduce Chapter 4. And in Chapter 4, this primarily focuses on chemical reactions. So the beginning of Chapter 4 looks at what happens with ions when they're dissolved into solution. So we're going to introduce some concepts like electrolyte and strong versus weak electrolytes. And this is the electrolyte. The concept of electrolytes is really important because it's going to define whether a metathesis reaction occurs in many cases. So as we're going to see, metathesis reactions are driven by taking ions out of solution, and so the formation of a weak electrolyte becomes a major driving force for those metathesis reactions. Now, another major thing that we're going to introduce in the beginning of Chapter 4 is the solubility rules. These are fundamentally important to this chapter, and they need to be memorized. So this is in Table 4.1. Again, one of the main driving forces for metathesis reactions is taking ions out of solution, and that could mean the formation of a solid precipitate or an insoluble salt. So memorizing the solubility rules are going to allow you to predict whether a insoluble salt forms and precipitates out or not, depending on what ions are present. And then we're also going to introduce to you guys what a molecular, complete ionic, and net ionic equation is. Now, in terms of the types of chemical reactions, the first group is going to be metathesis reactions, and these work out into a couple of different types. We have precipitation reactions, which is based on the solubility of the reactants and products. So that's where your solubility rules are going to come into play. We have acid-base, which is the second major category of metathesis reactions. And in this case, this is going to be forming weak electrolytes is going to be the driving force, like water, for example. So we're going to define what a strong and weak acid and base is. We're going to talk about neutralization reactions, and then we're going to talk about gas-forming reactions. So here again, this is something that you have to memorize, Table 4.4 and 4.6. These are the main gas-forming reactions. And really what you're going to see is that the gas-forming reactions are both a combination of acid-base and are a form of metathesis reaction. So in many cases, the gas-forming reactions are treated as sort of a separate entity from acid-base, but I keep them grouped with acid and base just to streamline metathesis reactions. And then moving beyond metathesis reactions, there's going to be a different category of reactions that involve oxidation and reduction. So we're going to learn how to predict oxidation numbers, and this is going to allow us to figure out which species are being oxidized and reduced. Then we're going to look at the species that are oxidized and reduced. We're going to be able to identify the oxidizing agent and the reducing agent. And then what's another really important thing is balancing half reactions and dealing with electrons in redox reactions. So we're going to find out that when you balance a redox reaction, you not only have to balance the mass, but you also have to balance the charge that's transferred. Okay, and then in the third section of this chapter, this is a very long chapter, Chapter 4. We're then going to go into solution concentration, so we're going to learn about molarity and molality, and we're going to learn how to do calculations with molarity and molality, and these are units of concentration, which is essentially how much stuff you have in a liquid, or it's basically how much stuff you have in a solvent, and the solvent could be a solid, liquid, or gas. So we'll talk about that. Typically in Chapter 4, though, we're talking about liquids and how much of a salt, for example, is dissolved in that liquid. And then finally, there's a whole slew of reactions that are going to use and draw on our knowledge of stoichiometry. So we're going to use molarity as a new unit conversion that's going to allow us to go from moles to volume by knowing the concentration. So we're going to now have another interconversion using molarity that allows us to use that concentration to go between moles of a substance and the volume of a solution. And then this is going to be important as we look at gravimetric and volumetric gravimetric calculations and volumetric calculations or titrations. So in the next part of the video, we're going to look at the resources that are available to you on Blackboard. In Chapter 4, we have several resources to you that are available on Blackboard. So like all chapters, we have the drills and solutions, and then there are two really good tools in here that you can use. For metathesis reactions, this takes a lot of practice to get used to, especially with working with the solubility rules. So we developed a metathesis reaction worksheet and video that you can do. The video is on YouTube, and the worksheet is available on Blackboard. So we recommend that you complete the worksheet first after you've practiced and done all of your after you've gone through the solubility rules and you've practiced and you think you're ready, you complete the worksheet and then you watch the video, and I go through and explain every single one, and you can make sure that you're doing the same thing that we are, and that we're all on the same page with metathesis reactions. We also have a solution, concentration, and lecture problems video where I go through all of the lecture problems along with some other examples, and these are all things that you can do on your own first, and again, check to make sure that you're doing the right thing. So we have some solutions to the Redox lecture problems, and then we have a whole bunch of tutorials. We have a tutorial on molarity and molarity calculations. We have a tutorial on dilution calculations. We have a salts and solubility simulation. We have a electrolyte simulation and an acid-base solution simulation. So these resources are available to you on Blackboard, and we recommend that you really make use of them, especially as you're going through the chapter and you're mastering different components.